Thank you. Thank you for that.
Welcome to the continuation of the Hosha'ana Rabba Tafshin Ayin Vav. I'm glad to see there's actually a few people still left. It's getting late. So as usual, when we open up our second piece, we do a brief review just to remember where we're up to. So basically, we've been talking about the interrelationship of Nidorim and the way in which that culminates the Zman Hadin, which begins with Nidorim and Erev Rosh Hashanah, continues on in Eter Nidorim and Kol Nidre in Yom Kippurim, and which somehow describes the nature of Kinui Nidorim B'chlal in terms of Achodesh Shabbat Libo, and where we found that the Shita's understanding of the idea of contrived as the word for Badami Libo, that really defines the nature of Rishus, just as Nidre Rishayim is in essence something which is Rochag in terms of Rishus, in creating a contrived reality. A contrived reality to such an extent that, as the Mor Nevuchim puts it, Mor Nevuchim gives a very beautiful description, a moshel of the way human beings are. And he talks about a metaphor of there being a palace of a melech, and people being measured according to their distance from the palace itself, from meeting the melech, from being outside, or from having any connection to a dream of ever getting inside. He calls the furthest possible thing from any connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He defines it as this: Choshev al ha'el, somebody who's always thinking about God. And Marbella Askiro, V'liyadia, he's always saying Baruch Hashem, Yirtz Hashem, and B'li Neder, of course. now you know why those all go together. Interesting. But the truth is, he knows nothing about what he's saying. He's always talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu without the slightest idea what that means. It's something that he heard from other people. The way I see this is it's not simply that he's outside of this space. Of course, he uses that bayit in the same sense as the bayit of the sukkah and the Beis of Bereshis itself, is why he takes this as his dogma. It's a space. So it's not simply that he's michutz labayit, not simply that he's rochak mimenu, but even the words that he's saying have no relationship to reality. Because Gam eino maskirat el bemet at all, v'lo choshev alav. He thinks he's thinking about God all the time. He thinks that he's very close to the Lord. Ki davar zeh shebedimyono v'shuhu maskiro b'piv. This thing that he keeps talking about, which is spelled G-O-D or B-U-D-D-A, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But whatever it is, it's a thing of some kind. Well, that thing, Eino to'em shum nimsa klal. It has no correspondence to any extant being. So I don't know what it is. Elohu badui. It's contrived. He created something, and now he's calling that something God. Dimyono badauto. He just created it out of whole cloth, out of his imagination. So it's not simply that he's distant, but even what he thinks he's talking about, he's not talking about. Not talking about anything. Not talking about anything that has a connection to external reality. This takes it.
Buddha Bada.
Yeah, Buddha sings the same thing.
I did find it. Whoever wants
Where
to
is
see
it?
it's at the bottom, right before the actual hara.
Oh, before the
Yeah,
hara.
right before the hara. Im timtzenu yimetecha v'im yiznachacha yiznachcha le'ad, or whatever.
It's David Hamelech's message to Shlomo. Okay. In any event, so then that takes it a step further. It's not simply a question of the Bada being a distance from the space that we're talking about. It's even worse than that. It's that the person is involved in ideas that have absolutely no correspondence to reality at all. It's not that he's rochok from the truth. It's that even what he's talking about has no resemblance to anything real. Any resemblance is purely coincidental. And that's basically what the problem of neder is. And it's because of that Chazal view Kinidre and Rishoyim as being an insight into the nature. I'm sorry, but could you close it again? Into the nature of Rishus itself, so that the distance that a person has from the Mokim, which we saw was the Mokim of Sukkah, the Mokim of Chochmah, the Mokim of a space which is outside of yourself, is absolutely essential in order for there to be any connection between you and reality. And any loss of that is the rishus of neder. Therefore, the Mishnah says, Ki nidrei ksherim doesn't exist, lo amaklu. And nidrei yishrayim is any possible type of nonsense that a person wants to get into. All of it. Another benazir, be'erke, be'charamim, but whatever it is. But anything that he wants to be involved in that is not part of what has to be for him, that's what he has. Because of this, we found that there's a specific relationship in terms of the new vision of what that space of reality is, that somehow or other it's meant to come from Sukkot. And because of that, it was the Chodesh HaShabbadah Melibo, which is the Makor to the entire din of Kinuyim. It was an attempt to avoid Sukkot. And in exactly the same way that the Hashlam of the Yemei Adin and the Hashlam of the Churban, Hashlama of the loss of the Luchas, that this comes not on Yom Kippurim as generally thought, but actually on Sukkot and even in Hosha'ana Rabba. This means that somehow the solution to the problem of being locked away in a space that is inside of your own head, and therefore has no connection to any reality outside, is something that drove Yerovam to being Docha Sukkot to the wrong month, so that becomes the Chodesh HaShabbadah Melibo. And because of that, we needed to look into Sukkot itself as being the makor of a way out of the mess that we've gotten ourselves into. Did I lose a piece, or is it here? So briefly, what we came to understand, just to review, what we came to understand is that the time that Koheles defines here as a quest, the reason that we find such a tremendous desperation to be able to contact something that's outside of ourselves, the reason that we feel the pain of the Havel Havalim, the reason that the quest of Kohelet is described here, is because that itself is the expression of the original Simcha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ma'aser Bereishis. Ma'aser Bereishis is a quest. And it's a quest that consists of a line, as the Ramchal explains, a line of hope. The very fact that it's a line means that ultimately the way that things are achieved in terms of Klal Yisrael's history is through a gathering current of the totality of the investments that have been made by Yisrael over all of the generations into an understanding and into a building of the Hashlama of Geula. And because of that, the actuality becomes the last piece in which everything suddenly slips into place, And we related that even to the idea of the Shalosh Shoyes Hosha'ana, which is the actual Hosha'ana that we read before Shabbos. Those Shalosh Shoyes, the last moments prior to Gula, are the critical moments, the crucial moments in which things come together. And the Rambam puts the individual's tshuva into exactly the same pattern, because he opens up the halacha of Shav Yom Echad Lifnei Mitatcha, and puts it together with this idea of Yisrael's gathering power of tshuva, to recognize that a person who is mishtadel asor tshuva, who lives a life of tshuva, ultimately gets out of that life kedei sheyamut v'hu bal teshuva, in exactly the same way that Sof Yisrael lasos tshuva besof galusam, which is merumas in the Zohar, we pointed out, which is mamish classic Rambam. There's merumas in the Zohar in the teva of Moshe Rabbeinu, in which the vatasimea besuf is the suf of Sof Hayamim, which Moshe creates with the kayach of teshuva, ultimately, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens up that teva again at the end of time, and that suf that was the original vision of Miriam for Moshe becomes the empowerment of Yochel Kalechad V'Yachad Liyas Tzadik Moshe Rabbeinu, and brings the clincher of the last moments that bring a world into teshuva. In exactly the same way that a particular human life, if it has a kav, if it has a tikva, if it has an ongoing quest that doesn't create artificial solutions in between, in the end is zocha kedei sheyamut v'hu bal teshuva, as a given reality to what that life will achieve. And it's because of that we have that wild story in the Zohar, in which we have the entire Bria singing Havel Havalim Hakol Havel again and again and again, in order to recognize that what we need is the absolute commitment to the ongoing quest. And the moment that a person isn't committed to that, then Azar Hakarev Yumat. Because Zar, Zarut, alienation, that's literally what the word Zarut means. It's alienation. There is no room for alienation, because the very idea of alienation is that the person is not part of the story of Bria itself, but rather, as the Rambam explains in the nature of Simcha, that it's the idea of Hamegiz Da'ato v'cholei kavod la'atzmo u'mitchabed be'einav b'mekomot elu choteh, obviously. But the most important is v'shoteh. He's insane. Insane because he's so completely wrapped up in a brain that has no petach. There's no pitchili. The same petach we saw for neder is the petach for teshuva. There's no petach to have the slightest, we use that word today, have an open mind. Open your mind. So there's no petach. There's not the slightest opening that allows the person to escape the badui reality in which he's constantly finding solutions that are based on the same problems that created the original issues that he supposedly is dealing with, and never becomes free. What we came to see was that it's the loss of that quest, and coupled with the increasing sophistication in which people have at last begun to recognize the contrivances of systems of thought, of religious beliefs, of deot that are mekubalot, of recognizing that the novlot chokhmah, I'm sorry, this is all review, so it's not meant to be understood on its own for those of you who are just tuned in now, but it's a brief review that will allow you to, I believe, come back in. The novlot chokhmah, in which things are simply leaves dripping from a tree of chokhmah el yoina, but which don't provide for the person who finds them lying on the ground an opening to that chokhmah, an opening to that space, but instead turn, as the Zohar says, turn gedolei Yisrael into tipshai Yisrael, in which the greater the challenge of being able to enter that space, and the greater your kelim of being able to enter that space, the more Omer lakol sachalhu, you're announcing to the world what a fool you are, is become so evident to people. It's become so clear that we live in a time of literal madness, in which people are willing to believe the most absurd things, in which the evidence of an entire Bria that shouts for opening, that begs for recognition, that offers entirely new ways of Avodah Shamayim that people could never dream of, is instead laughed at and rejected because it doesn't fit in the preconceived notions that are millennia out of date, literally, that are meant for minds that don't have the level of awareness and don't have the level of openness and don't even know what Pitchi L'Rayati could possibly mean, because that level of love was inaccessible to most people throughout human history. That sense has led to not only a feeling of desperation that expresses itself in the absurdity of some of the religious observances and the desperation of the search for some type of supposed spiritual experience or some attempt to share in simcha that never leads to simcha, but instead leaves people feeling empty and hollow and wishing that they had better solutions, is precisely what the Havel Havalim and description of Kohelet is all about. His own quest is related to Sukkot because Sukkot is about the rediscovery of Petach through the most amazing application of the Rambam, in which the end, where a person is able to gain a completely new perspective, which he speaks about in terms of death or in terms of neshika or in terms of letting go, because after all, Teshuvah is all about aziva, letting go. But the point of Sukkot is letting go. It's about ultimate aziva. It's about asifa. It's the zmana asif. It's the utilization of old age, the utilization of death, of Solosgar and V'yekov, of a year that is dying, of the autumnal times, of the transition into a completely new world, of leaving behind your dirat kva, entering into a dirat arai, because that will allow you to recognize that the great life that you left behind, supposedly, when you're not in your sukkah, had nothing to offer you. In exactly the same moment that a typical human response at the moment of death is that I haven't done a damn thing, and I haven't even begun to live, and I shouldn't be dying now. This is always the response of accident victims. And all of the things that I thought I had, I never had. What was it all about? That simple perspective is the application of the search of a person in the beginnings of his tshuva on Yom Kippurim as it's translated into Sukkot. But in the deepest way in which Sukkot is actually not just the loss of an old perspective, but being granted the vision of Socha B'Ruach HaKodesh, a broader perspective that is yours magically, b'Chag HaSukkot. Because by definition, simcha can only mean the simcha v'yismach Hashem b'ma'asav. And therefore, if this is man simcha seno, it means that it's a time that is misugal and is given to you milamala to open up your mind, to for the first time being able to be osik as a human being. And a human being means, as Adam Arishon was osik, in discovering that nature has a mind, that Bria has a mind, and it isn't your mind. And it's that universality that is demanded by Sukkot, as the Gemara puts it, because it's for everyone. That's the idea. That's why it's gadol on the day of Kabbalah Satzara. That's how it becomes a violation of all of the drives that led to the Egel, or that led to the Shviras HaLuchais, because it's beyond them. How is it beyond them? If it's about Shivim Umais, and it's about Goyim, and it's about animals, and it's about worms, and it's about plants and flowers and so on, is that beyond them? In a sense, yes, it's beyond them, because it teaches you the experience of the Yismach Hashem B'Ma'asav as a direct participant by entry into, for the first time, the space that the Navlut Chokhmah did not guarantee you. They offered you a petach, but Sukkot presents you that petach. And the Simchas Pesach Shoeva allowed people to actually become Nevi'im, to learn what it means to be mitpalel ala geshamim, and to bring rain to the world, which by definition means that you understand the way in which all elements of Bria are relating to the most fundamental solution of the development of life in the first place. Why do we need water? What did we get out of the water? How did we crawl out of the water? All of that is part of what you must know in order to be mispalel ala geshamim. And therefore, for the first time, as the Rambam says, you can actually be mispalel by not thinking and gaining the kavanah of tefillah. The kavanah of tefillah is first to enter the space of tefillah, says the Rambam. V'achar kach yitpalel. So kavanah is not the kavanah of the words of tefillah. Kavanah is to create the direction of tefillah by making the space for tefillah. And the only way to do that is to stop thinking, because you can't escape your mind when you think. It doesn't matter what you're thinking about. You must be mefana libcha from all thinking and learn to see yourself from the outside in a universe in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mekomo Shel Olam, where it isn't you. We make the mistake of thinking that the idea, even of the experience of that space, is to find it within ourselves, but that's exactly the mistake. It's to find it outside of yourself. It's to be yireh atzmos somewhere else. And that's why it's kosher to understanding the theory of mind of Ma'aseh Bereishis. That which the Rambam always calls the seichel, the news, the reality of how a world is integrated in ways that can only be tasted by us as part of the nature of our own consciousness, and then recognizing that it isn't identical with our own consciousness. It's rather the mokum of that consciousness. You can then daven. You can then say Kriyat Shema. But the moment that you lose that connection, says the Rambam, he expresses this in his Ha'ara in Parak Aleph. The moment that you lose that connection, it's lost. You are no longer in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As long as you have that connection, you are together. But instead, what we do is we become cynical, and we believe that it's too complicated. I don't really understand what it means. Somehow or other, the Torah never gives me anything. Everything seems to be contrived, because indeed it is. It's contrived by your own mind. Indeed it is. So all of your experiences where you're talking about something badui that are all the right words but have nothing to do with the reality behind them, as the Rambam says. I mean, the guy said, what do you want? I'm talking about God. I'm thinking about God. No, you're not. You're thinking about something that you have created. And it is created, literally fabricated, as Barnea pointed out of the same bud, out of the same fabric, out of the same whole cloth that every bidui consists of. It's manufacturing things, contriving things to work out in ways that you feel comfortable. And the very comfort means that you deny Havel Havali. And you'll notice that all of the development of the world around us is only because of the growing recognition of Havel Havalim. Nobody is willing to invest in the type of solutions that they would once invest in. And things used to take centuries until people could learn to doubt their total veracity. Now it can take weeks and months. And that's all. And already people begin to see that it breaks down and it doesn't make sense and so on. So all of our development in every area comes from a growing recognition of Havel Havalim. To take Havel Havalim and to turn it into cynicism, instead of recognizing that that itself is the very quest of the Bria that began with the initial Yismach Hashem b'ma'asav, that is the very quest that was the Deshoyim's Kal V'chomer, that is the very quest that allows you to set up your life in such a way that the only thing that you really want is the Yom Nashek, that Nashika, which is Sakosa L'Roshi B'Yom Nashek, The idea of that transition, that liminal space which the sukkahs provide between different states of reality and different states of mind and different perspectives. And in the end, you don't buy into a life that doesn't provide you with reality. You buy into it only as an investment to something that ultimately allows you to break out of its own limitations. And that indeed is the idea of the sukkah. That is a transition between the previous year and this year, transition between a level of tshuva of Yom Kippur and an ability to actually let go, transition in a deeper sense between a life in Olam Hazeh and a life in Olam Haba. And a transition in the ultimate sense, as the Gemara says, where Olam Hazeh Yotze, Olam Haba Nichnas, in which the entire universe changes. That's all part of the Sukkah's Livyosan, which has been malava us together with that kav from the beginning of Ma'aseh Bereshis, and which is therefore the only way that we conceive really of Sukkahs. So all of these strange esoterica that is connected with Sukkahs, that's strange at the least. It's things that once you sense what a sukkah is, you would know it yourself. Even if you've never heard the words, you understand. Well, obviously, there's a livui. That kav is the ultimate livui. When it created an actual vision of something that lives with you, and that call it the livyatan. But that's the idea of the livui. And that's the idea of the space that you have to be part of. To take those very drives, to take that quest itself and to turn it into the problem instead of the solution is the most absurd being locked into yourself that is imaginable. And therefore, we read specifically from Kohelet in order that people should recognize that instead of utilizing that quest as a way out of your mind, as a way of beginning to understand other mind, as beginning to understand even the Shivim Umot, as beginning to understand nature, animals, plants, the needs for Mayim, and so on. And therefore to recognize the Bria as a super mind, to instead make it, well, it's so complex that I can't have it, or to feel it's something that I can never gain, or to say, well, I'm always going around in circles, when that's the first lines in Kohelet, is that I'm always going around in circles. That's exactly the point, and that begins his quest. To take that and to make it acts and statements and beliefs in cynicism and in hopelessness, where, as the Rambam is saying, the whole point is that if you continue to do this, you will ultimately break out. That's what it's about, is breaking out. That this is whether it's in terms of your quest directly for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the end, Timtze'ehu, you will find him. Or it's just a quest for yourself. It always will end up in the same place, because that is exactly what Bria is about. The dangers, remember what this is about. This is Yetziat Mitzrayim. This is Koved. This is Koved HaBriyos. This is Anani HaKoved. This is caring about life. This is the experience of the ultimate joy of being. So that the dangers of imprisonment, the Gemara says, Cherev al Habadim. You can read that as Cherev al Habodim. People that are completely alone. Alone in what sense? I'm not open to input. I'm not open to input. You have something to say. You don't like me? Go join some other group. You're different than my particular, whatever it is, my nusach, my approach, anything at all. Anything is different. Wear a different kind of kippah, whatever it is. Go away. That's the Cherev al Habadim. So I already have all the answers, and only the things that fit the particular structure of answers that I expect, those are the things that I listen to. Those are the things that I'm interested in. Those are the books that I read because it confirms my belief of what I already know. Those are the magazines that I'll look at. The absurd magazines in which every individual rabbi has a picture that put in with the picture of some other rabbi to prove that all rabbis like each other as long as they're part of the same rabbinic magazine. I mean, it's beyond belief. An entire structure of nonsense that proclaims Libo chaser, vomer lakol sachalu, and everybody sees what kind of sickness is this. What is it meant to be proven by this nonsense? So the complete non-sustainability, the hopelessness of any future makes no difference. Because I'm totally closed. So when you say cherev al habadi, and then the Gemara says, v'lo rak, that they're chotim, ela shemitapshim, they become idiots, which is exactly what we have in the story of that Zohar. These are Gedolei Yisrael, these are Tipshai Yisrael. Why? Because mitapshim. And not only mitapshim, but in the end chotim, because it says cherev al habadim v'nalu. So that it all becomes, in the end, such a self-involvement that it becomes totally chait. This idea of the dangers of being unaware, as Rashi says, is the Ummah Ha'olam will say to you, and this is the pasuk, and Rashi is medayek. Divrei Torah is always lashon nafik. So imatem me'avtim et Torah. So they will say, Shaitim matem nechshav. So you will be considered idiots. So, does somebody care whether the Ummah Ha'olam think that we're idiots? That's exactly the problem. That is exactly why we're idiots, because nobody cares. Given that there is no theory of mind, of a Bria, the response that we are idiots means nothing to me. Because why wouldn't somebody who doesn't know where I'm coming from think I'm an idiot? Why would it be surprising to me that somebody should write a letter and ask, why is it that every time a religious Jew appears on television, he appears insane? That's not an intelligent question because, well, of course he appears insane. To you, he appears insane. But it can't be because he is insane. It must be because you're insane. The way in which this type of thing ultimately evolves is true insanity. It's intelligent, brilliant people who are molei v'gadush with Torah and have learned Yirat Shamayim are complete and total idiots. You can't speak to them literally olive base about anything at all except what it happens to be that they believe in the first place. So this is the ultimate Am Naval, Zeichet Kabbalas HaTorah, V'lo Chacham, having learned absolutely nothing from it. And not only that, but the dangers of this imprisonment are so great that they lead into the ultimate contrived realities in which they draw everyone into a contrived reality. So this becomes...
The Rebbe hasn't addressed the tremendous fallout of intelligent teenagers and youth who say this is empty and totally leaving it in droves. It's a
What do you mean I haven't
system.
addressed? I'm saying that this is our problem. You don't have to talk about people outside. Even if someone is too fine of a person to say, I give up on Torah completely, like such people don't have enough background. But they have given up. They just pretend not to have given up, but they have given up. They're hopeless. They don't believe there's any place to go. What do you mean, kol yochel, kol yochel? That's a serious statement. Because the Rambam is flipped out. What do you mean, Timtze'eh? Who finds God? I don't understand. There's some kind of Simcha Shal Mitzvah. Who's got Simcha Shal Mitzvah? There's no such thing. There's really a Simcha Pesach Shoeva? Bull. Who do you know that it's supposed to? This is literally what people feel. You're talking about teenagers that drop out. You've dropped out. To some extent. Saying all of us. Barnea is a pretty good example of a guy that keeps going at it. If there's ever a quester, it's Barnea. But Lamaisa, all of us have to some extent, to whatever extent there isn't that driving, continued commitment, to whatever extent the person can sit back, what's it worthwhile anyway? I'm just not up to it today to continue playing the game. That's basically the way people feel, that ultimately it's playing the game. So all of the grandeur and all of the literal ability to change the world in an instant in terms of tshuva, that's the Godel HaTshuva, Shebishva Yachid Shasa Tshuva. Instead, either we're looking around for eitzes for doing things, or for blogging or writing letters, or for, I don't know, whatever it is. I mean, the crazy things that we think about, and the political discussions that we have, and we ought to do this, and we ought to do that, and we ought to bomb them, and we ought to, I mean, just crazy things, all of which are just shlichut yad, childish alternatives to a real reality that should completely change perceptions, and which could instantly happen. So it's not about the teenagers. It's much more poignantly about everybody, about day-to-day life. There's nothing more day-to-day than this complete change of perception, because it's completely open, but nobody tries it. So, well, I daven all the time. Davening doesn't do anything for me. I hear this all, it doesn't do it. First of all, it's not meant to do anything for you, but besides that, you've never once tried to daven. Not once. You didn't bother learning the halachas of what it means to daven. So I understand you're saying, but I have so much kavanah. I think about every word. But that's exactly why you've never davened. That's the whole point.
Your Ravim does that.
What's it? Your Ravim is wonderful. It's b'chadish in every tefillah. That's right. Beautiful. The same your Rav is your bada. Never davened a tefillah that wasn't mechudesh. Always some new idea. Simla chadasha. Fantastic chidushim all the time, but all within his own mind. Where ultimately the Yirat Shamayim is the coming face to face, as the Rambam says, with the world as it is, with the Shivim Umot as they are, with the nature of life as it is, and with the concern for being able to see that life, experience that life, and therefore in what it is that you are, seeing how it fits into a world of life, which is itself part of a Mekomer Shel Olam that extends infinitely into what Moshe Rabbeinu saw, at that moment of Sakosias Kapi, that all of the possibilities of Bria are open in front of you. The wildest science fiction books don't touch on the possibilities that were open in front of Moshe Rabbeinu. Don't touch on the possibilities of the lives that are open to each and every one of us as part of that gathering strength of tikva, in which if you stretch your imagination, you can understand that what's really going on in the universe is so absurdly and totally of different scales than the nonsense that we ourselves are involved in the short scale of our lives, or in this particular stage of human development, or this planet's development, for that matter, the universe's development. That, I mean, it's just, you burst out laughing at thinking of the temerity, of the stupidity, of the childishness, of what in the world this is supposed to really mean. How in the world did you take that as being the description of the way things are and what it is you're supposed to be doing? So you're saying, okay, but I mean, can I know? No, of course you can't know. Gamet olam natan b'libam shelo yimtza adam mitzvah b'kol asher asa Elokim mirosh shalatso. There's no way to know. Gam im yomar hachacham ladat lo yochol ladat. Of course there's no way to know. That's the Havel Havalim. But that's the beauty of it. That's the quest of it. That's the endlessness of it. That's the amazing ride that every human being is on. And the privilege of being part of an Ummah that is on such a ride, that is the Bereshis of this planet, and the Bishvil Yisrael Shemik Bereshis, and ultimately of the universe as a whole, in terms of the klal that we call Yisrael. That is an amazing thing to be part of, and obviously it's a quest, an ongoing quest. So if you look at your life the way that you would look at Nadari, so imagine, so here you are, 30 years after making a neder, and you have charot on that neder, but you don't know how to get out of that neder. Somebody says to you, well, suppose I had told you at the time, little boy, when you grow up a little bit, are you sure that you're going to think about it in this way? And you'd say, no, actually, I wouldn't be sure. That's right. So would you have made the neder if you were? No. Okay, so then be mature. Tehei b'da'atcha. That's true of your life, you understand? You made a lot of mistakes. Maybe those mistakes were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. It doesn't matter. Stop that. Were you equipped at the time to be able to actually deal with the mistakes you were making? Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. True or not true? The world is made with a hay. There's no floor underneath you. You're going to fall out of that floor. You're saying, but it was terrible. Yeah, you're right. It was terrible, and every person makes the same mistake. So, but now you're thinking, okay, but if I could go back. Yeah, okay, but that would be another life. But that's what Neder is all about. What you're saying is, if you could whisper in your ear, hey, when you grow up, you're not going to think that this makes sense. Would you say, you know something, me? You got a point. You would. And ultimately, that is what the kav is about. If there's a kav, that at any point in your life you're looking back at the immature self or the less mature self, but please stop chewing that gum, and you're saying, gosh, I really knew at the time, I just wasn't mature enough to think about it. So let me tell myself that now, because once that kav is there, the life is there as just as Klal Yisrael's life is there, from beginning to end. It's one long thing. There's no such thing as every generation starting again. We never start again. We're part of that kav, from Ma'aser Bereshis, from Kabbalah Satira, going on through Geula, to the Hashlama, and everybody feels that. You don't feel you started from nowhere, obviously not. But if you started evolution over again, it's a constant development of information and data that changes the nature of Bria all the time. So if you are consciously part of that single life which is yours, and that's what the Rambam is introducing in Bereshit, then that means that you're always in touch with the ability to find a petach, to find a charata, to be osek in how do I make that part of my life part of this part of my life? Where do I gain the perspective that allows it to be one hashlama? That perspective is the perspective of Sukkah, where I could see it as a space. Can you learn to see your life as a space? Absolutely. Can it be the most instantaneous, accessible thing to you? Absolutely. Instantaneously accessible. You pop out of the nonsense that you're used to, and you pop into a space that provides you with that perspective, and you see yours. And that's the Rambam saying, La'alocha. This is not crazy stuff. This is La'alocha. So when we talk about the Hasidim or Yishonim or Yishorim Sha'achas Lifnei HaTfilah, says the Rambam, that's why. What were they doing? They were making it possible for themselves to pop out of those little bits of local lives into seeing themselves as being Omed Bifnei Hashchina. When you see yourself, you're not seeing yourself at a particular moment. You're seeing your life as Omed Bifnei Hashchina. And in the same way in which a particular moment of your life has meaning, poignancy, connectedness, only when it's part of a life, and has none of that when it's not part of a life, but is novlot of a life. It's just little leaves that have fluttered down from your life that you don't even remember, that you literally can't even think of just a few years later. You don't remember. It was incredibly important at the time. It was my damn phone number. Go try to remember it 20 years from now. Not a clue. The things that you think I'd never forget. The beautiful moments of a child growing up. I remember, didn't he say something clever when he was 5? I remember we thought it was clever. What the heck was it? Can't remember. Things that you thought would be wonderful, glorious moments. They're not a word. And you come at the end of a life with 30 seconds of memory, if you are lucky. Oh, this is an absolutely amazing thing. The emptiness of it, the hopelessness of it, the horror of it, living a life that has nothing, complete and total emptiness. Why? Because it isn't a life. It's a bunch of disconnected, disassociated instances in which there's no tikva, there's no hope, and that's what we call it. It's hopeless. You literally feel it's hopeless, and that's the And that's that deepest sense of hopelessness that the Ramchal is describing. So this is what we have to deal with on Sukkot, is that loss of hope. And there's no greater time to be zorcha to the simcha that's involved in that. Tiknat the Rambam keeps describing it as simcha. He finds himself just happier and happier. The nature of the simcha shel mitzvah. And the closing in Kohelet of Sof Davar Hakol Nishmat, Elokim Yirah, because that's the only external reality. That's what it means, Yirah. To be in that presence, to learn to be able.
The simcha's response to the outside force that demanded it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, that's the way we've always spoken about it, but there's something added here, which is it's the Dvarim Atzmam. It's the fact that they exist outside of you. It's the space of it, not simply the investment into it that came from the outside. I think in the past we spoke about it in that way, but I think this is a different nakuda. The need to get into a different space, not to expand your mind into a broader space, is a very, very important idea. It's a new way of seeing the dinim of tefillah as applying to sukkah, which is the meaning of tzalusa and sel. It relates in this deep way to tefillah and to the mitzvah of Yichud Hashem, to Kriyat Shema, as the Rambam says, right? To the development of the simcha from Ma'aser Bereishis, the mitzvah chashuva of Borashis as being Bereshis, and the vindication of a bria, being part of that vindication. So that it really boils down to the willingness to take oneself seriously. And that's a very difficult thing. We believe that in all of the fetching and self-involvement that we're taking ourselves seriously, but the opposite is true. What we're actually doing is belittling any meaning in our life by making all of the most idiotic concerns the essence of what it is that our minds are focused on. I mean, it's just beyond belief, the type of things that people think about and talk about it, how embarrassing it is when you look back at that and you say, this is what I did with a human life? What a human life is, what it's meant to achieve, what it can achieve. This is what I did with it. And it's like the stupidities are worse than the worst things that you could have done. And that's the Rov Chayim Hevel Lefonecha, Motar Adam Min Habayim Ha'ayin. It's that sense of complete hopelessness. What is my life for? And this is Kohelet, and this is Sukkot, and it's demanding of you that perspective. To take yourself seriously is exactly the opposite of the kvetchiness and the self-involvement. That's not taking yourself seriously. That's infantile. That's how a child works all the time. It's how an infant works. So how can you call that taking yourself seriously? It's taking nothing seriously. It's giving up on the seriousness and meaningness of the essence of Anane HaKavod. Anane HaKavod is about honor. It's about dignity. It's about recognizing that Bria provided for you in the most insane way. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing to think of the billions of years of formation that went into the possibility of your having the mind that you have. It's just astounding. And you take it, you throw it out the window as if it's an infantile concern. And if I have a right to sit around and to kvetch and to say that I'm unhappy about the fact that I have to quest, when that's the essence of what you were put there for in the first place. It's truly an astounding craziness, which is the complete opposite of any sense of dignity and self-respect. In that sense of COVID, it's a complete loss of self-respect. So that the main issue of Anani HaKavod is to learn self-respect. To be able to look at yourself and be embarrassed by taking something so grand and making it into something so cheap and ridiculous. And then all of the inyanim of tshuva become much more real to you, because the fact that you can now recognize the greater level maturity, the understanding that in the same way that petach of nidorim and charot of nidorim take local realities, or mevatel those local realities, forget about it. So we're okeret. All of the things that led you into the issues that are so important in your life, that you feel have been so destructive in your life, they're local aberrations for someone who lives a life of this type. So it's an aberration. So you're embarrassed by the aberration. So go and be okaret. That's all. Go and be mischared on it. Go find a petach on it. But it's all one vast life of immense self-respect. And aberrations even out, as they always do, as things become broader and broader, and tend to impact on every little aberration from the totality and the strength of the currents that run through that life, just as Klal Yisrael's history may be full of aberrations, but in terms of the way the Torah views it, it's Am Zeh, that is Tiilati Yisaperu, and then in the end are Banim Lo Yishakeru, the Banim of Emunah, I mean, understand. I mean, you said you hate us. You said we're such idiots. You said, how are we all of a sudden Banim Lo Yishakeru? I thought that's all we've done all the time. But we know the answer to that. It's not a question. One is local and one is the total. And it's the most amazing thing. Aninu Goyim Amo, that even the Goyim will be able to see. What did they know that enabled them to put up with this for millennia? What did they know? How deeply could they have understood what it was all about? And it is a shock what it is that we've put up with knowing so little and having so little self-respect. But when you finally reach the point at which you truly begin to doubt your own contrivances, then the only solution is to regain self-respect. And in regaining that self-respect, you no longer look at things that seem complicated to you and say, these are contrived. On the contrary, it's those things that are the simplest things. It's keeping up with the amazing amount of sheker that's within us. That's what's contrived. And that takes a tremendous amount of work. So people who are miserable and thinking about themselves all day long put in an immense amount of work and gain nothing but misery for it. And that is the thing that allows them to deny the value of the things that are valuable, because they don't want to have the dignity that will make them responsible, that will make them free. It's the fear of freedom. And the ultimate Yitzias Mitzrayim, the reconstruction of dignity, and the reconstruction of terror, and the reconstruction of the luchais, and recognizing that the shattered luchais can actually be reconstructed within your mind. These things are real, and if you stop believing in them as real, then you stop believing in yourself as real. It's completely the same, and that's what the Rambam is saying. You can't have one without the other in the Perek. You can't have a Klal Yisrael that aims towards Geula if you don't understand that you can have a human being that is by definition aimed towards Kadesh Yamut V'hu Ba'al Teshuvah, because that reflects on the entirety of his life, creates a space for the entirety of life, and the taste of it we have in Chag HaSukkos. The translation of that vision is a translation into everyday life. It's a translation into every tefillah. Once you learn to do that, once you learn to pop out of the space of your head, you can accomplish it at will. It's something that you learn. It's something that you become more and more effective at, as the Rambam says. So friends, so start small. So start with tefillah. So start with Kriyat Shema. But I mean, the ultimate goal is to become completely human and completely free and completely living within an Anei HaKavod, which is the sum total of all of the investment that was put into Ma'aser Bereishis for your consciousness. And that requires a tremendous amount of work. You have to work on recognizing the mind of Bria, the mind of others, and the pulling back and saying, well, I don't understand that. That's too complicated. Maybe that's for Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, that's what the Rambam is talking about, Moshe Rabbeinu, you know? This is how Moshe Rabbeinu is. So so if it's Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not for me. On the contrary, that's the thing that is for you. That's the whole point, is that Moshe Rabbeinu
Rabba
becomes the vision of Kol Echad V'Echad. That's the vision of Sefer Dvarim. That's all that we talk about. That's what the Melech goes around learning Yomam V'Layl. Is this Mishnah Torah? No, it's for Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not for me. That's the whole yesod of the Torah, is that if it's for Moshe Rabbeinu, it is for you. Because this is a human being, a b'shagamu basar, and this is what a human being is capable of. And if you would have asked him, did you do anything special? Absolutely not. I don't understand. I don't understand. Who's asking you for any favors? We're just giving you the opportunity to be yourself. You're sitting around pretending that somebody wants something from you. What are you, crazy? Who wants anything from you? And this is the amazing mivchan. In the end, we're talking about the Shivim Umayis. And the taina that the Shivim Umayis have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he says, no, you weren't, I offered you the Torah. You weren't makabel the Torah. The answer. Did you ever kafa aleinu har chagigis the way you did to Yisrael? That's our biggest problem. Is the kafa aleinu har chagigis. Did you ever kafa aleinu har chagigis? What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's answer to did you ever kafa aleinu har chagigis? Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll give you another chance. Just be Makayim, a mitzvah kala called Sukkah. Okay, sounds great, they say. And then we're in? Absolutely. Olam Haba, the whole jazz, just for like 5 minutes of a mitzvah? Absolutely. Great. So everybody goes and they build a sukkah and they're all very excited, right? And what happens? HaKadosh Baruch Hu motzi chama min artika, which is the introduction to the Mishnah of Kinidrei Rishayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu motzi chama min artika. That's the words before Kinidrei Rishayim, the interruption of the first Mishnah of the Dorn. Unbelievable, right? So what happens? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is motzi chama min artika, and it is 120 degrees outside. And these guys, oh my God, what do we do now? Oh, wow, look at this. Mitzvah, put them in a sukkah. Yay! Out they go. Damn sukkah, smash, and they kick it, and then they go back into the house and turn on the air conditioning. Whew! Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you see? Says the well, what do you mean, you see? They are put from the sukkah. I understand. And you're all supposed to be sitting in a sukkah under those circumstances. It's all, you're a fool, it says. You're an idiot if you sit in a sukkah where you're mitzvah on the sukkah. That's not a mitzvah. True, says the Gemara, but they don't kick it down, do they? And this is it, the difference between the Shivim Purim and that single par on Shmini Atzeres. The difference between the Umas Ha'olam and Yisrael. Do you kick your sukkah down or do you shut the door nicely? Isn't that a little bit crazy? And this is the solution to Kafalei Marchagiyas. And the answer is absolutely. Because the only point of the Kafalei Marchagiyas, which you idiots think, well, you could have forced us into it. Do you really think so? That's what it's about, forcing you into it. If it were that, you would kick it down the minute that you could. Hey, I got a good idea. Why don't we try out a sukkah? Sure enough, you kick it down the moment you can. To what it takes for a nation to be Kabul Torah when you're Kafalei Marchagiyas, which is the worst possible thing. The only people who could tolerate such a thing are those who recognize that it's the most wonderful thing in the world. Because if you weren't kofa me with the Har Chagigis, I would have been stuck with accepting the Torah out of the stupidities of my own mind. Thank God that it was so real that it was as if it was the only option. That's how real it was. And that's the only thing that is me. Everything else is garbage. And you, if we would have been Kafalei Marchagiyas, you would have run as fast as your little tails could possibly be tucked between your legs. And that's exactly what you're going to do to the sukkah. You don't want the sukkah. You want to get something out of the sukkah. It's not an external reality. It's not a privilege. It's not the deepest self-respect to discover that reality has a place for you. It's a chance to grab some olam haba. Well, little boys, let's see how you do it. I mean, I wouldn't want you to feel I'm being unfair in any way.
They come there vuvia instead of genetic separation.
That's excellent. That's beautiful.
Wow.
That is stunning. Stunning. Absolutely stunning. Just beautiful. Wow.
No, the grass is scared about the individual.
It says that Yotzim, it's the Lashon of the Medrash, that it's Yotzim Birvuvia. So the Shaim that are Yotzim Birvuvia, Alachas Kama Kama. The Lashon of the Gemara is that all of the Umas Island come Birvuvia. That's amazing. And that, of course, the total loss of self-respect is that Birvuvia. I mean, if there ever was a time of loss of self-respect, it's an age of group thinking, of the stupidities in which some idiot writes a blog at everybody. I mean, it's such a thing as was inconceivable just a short while ago, that the most intelligent people completely lose their ability to think because they lose all self-respect. There's no point in thinking. Nothing will make any difference anyway. Why in the world should we attempt to actually create a deal with Iran? The actual never happens anyway. All that happens is you go through the motion. So what the heck? Let's go through the motions. I mean, it's amazing that this becomes an actual way of conducting world policy. That's how idiotic it is. And you think, how is it possible people should buy into this? And then you realize, what do you mean, how is it possible? It's everything is this. It's absolutely no different. I mean, the chances of a person to have a particular expertise or interest in one particular thing, that he's going to understand how stupid this is because he's a historian or whatever. Maybe. But overall, to expect human beings to think that there should be some responsibility, that things are supposed to make a difference, what difference does it make? The answer to your question on the, the Gallup poll is no. Don't care, basically. This is what is happening, Hashem Yerachim, to a very, very large and significant piece of Klal Yisrael. 99%, 99.9%, in which all that's important is form, and all that's important is pretending that I have some connection to Torah, and all that's important is saying the right words and dressing the right dress, and getting the right red and the shidduch red. And God help us. And the emptiness of it, the stupidity of it, in which all that counts is to be accepted within the self-created structures of a society that doesn't exist in the real world. I mean, people on the outside look at it and say, well, these people are mad. They're totally mad. And not to understand that these are universal issues. The same thing, you got a shidduch crisis. That shidduch crisis is the Mormon shidduch crisis. Somebody just put out a book showing exactly the same issues. It has nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with the issues. It has to do with universal issues of insane belief systems, in which this is always, but the guy traces, it's amazing, exactly the same situations, because it creates the same type of nuttiness, in which anybody who recognizes the contrivances drops out. The people that are less capable of doing that still keep believing in it. So now there's no men to be able to go for these women. And it's amazing, exactly the same things. And nobody has the guts to just say goodbye.
The emperor has no clothes.
And so, Rabbosai, may this Hosha'ana Rabba be at least the beginnings of a Tshuva Shlema, so that the Pitkaot can go out for Klal Yisrael. I don't think it's a coincidence that we had such Besuras Rose Dafka tonight on Hosha'ana Rabbah this year. That it should be an opening to a Geula, an opening of Besura Teva, an opening to a Tshuva Shlema, to the beginnings of a new life of Ora, B'Simcha, of a quest that began with the Deshoyim, and whose dreams can be traced all the way back to the Mitzvah Chashuva, Misheshes Yemei Bereshis, of Bora Shis equals Bereshis. Shana Tova, should be Zocha to Leitin tomorrow. Okay.
We have to see the stars through the sky, which are not created for us.
Very nice.
Giving us the
Very nice. Very nice. Very nice.
Funny, Rabbi mentioned Gallup polls. They just did one about a month and a half ago. Jews all over the United States. What is the one most important thing to Jewish identity? Over 67% of them responded a sense of humor. 5% responded hello. Hallelujah and praise. This is what they're working about.
Very. It's a shot.
Very good.
I'm gonna stop because I have to go.
We're finished.
Wait, I'm gonna write down this idea.